Hello and welcome to ANC Decides, the show that gives you up-to-the-minute commentary and analysis building up to the ANC's December elective conference. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Let's kickstart today's show with the election race-related headlines. The ANC finalizes the number of delegates each province will send to the December National Conference. The succession race is now down to how many delegates each candidate can pursue. Free State ANC PC ordered through agreement to hold its provincial conference from the 1st to the 3rd of December. It's now up to the NEC to decide whether to grant the provincial congress. And MKMVA's Kebi Mabatswe calls Ramaphosa a factionalist. That's following Ramaphosa's address at the MK National Council over the weekend. The ANC has finalized the number of delegates each province will send to the December National Conference. The race for the presidency is now down to how many delegates each candidate can pursue. KwaZulu-Natal remains the biggest ANC bloc despite a significant drop in delegates compared to the 2012 Mangaung Conference. Mpumalanga is now the second most influential ANC province after edging over the Eastern Cape. The latest figures put Mpumalanga chairperson David Mabuza in pole position to be the kingmaker in the race. The positioning of the Free State and Northwest in the delegates' pecking order also gives Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma an upper hand in the race. It now remains to be seen if provinces will vote as a bloc as they did in 2012.
Our constitution says to be a candidate, you must be nominated by a province. That's what our constitution says. We've said we'll deal with that in the following way. We'll allow branches to nominate, put in a box, at the end of the process, open the boxes, count the nominations. If Zizi, in the unlikely event, as Zizi is nominated as a president, he receives 400 nominations. And Kusela Sangoni gets 2 nominations. It will be reflected in the report, but the official nomination of that province will be Zizikot.
Now this is the number of delegates each province will be sending to the ANC conference. KwaZulu-Natal will send 870, Mpumalanga 736, Eastern Cape 648, Limpopo 643, Northwest 538, Gauteng 508, Free State 409, Western Cape 182 and Northern Cape 197. Now this is how each province's delegates' numbers have risen or fallen since the 2012 Mangaung Conference. KwaZulu-Natal has dropped from 974 back in 2012 to 870 in 2017. Mpumalanga has risen from 467 in 2012 to 736 this year. Eastern Cape has dropped from 676 in 2012 to 648 in 2017. Limpopo has risen from 574 in 2012 to 643 in 2017. Northwest has risen from 234 in 2012 to 538 in 2017. Gauteng has risen from 500 in 2012 to 508 to date. Free State has risen from 324 back in 2012 to 409 to date. Northern Cape has risen from 176 in 2012 to 197 in 2017. Now over to the Western Cape, it's risen from 178 in 2012 to 182 in 2017. Now, to unpack this further, we're joined in studio by political analyst Levi Ndo. Mr. Ndo, a very warm welcome to you.
Good evening to you, Mfundo. Good evening to the viewers at home.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, just taking us, at least, or taking you through those demographics, or at least the numbers thereof. What do you make of Mpumalanga, particularly now somehow emerging as the kingmaker?
Well, I think one other area that we need to look at firstly is that the ANC conference is supposed to be dominated by branches of the ANC. And this must, the rise of numbers or of branches in Mpumalanga came as a result of the fact that Mpumalanga has been able to to have branches in good standing, and they've been able maybe to launch more other branches. But also in the main, as we've indicated, it's about numbers. But then it must also put a challenge on KwaZulu-Natal to say, what is it that has happened in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of their branches? Is the ANC, instead of having more numbers in KwaZulu-Natal, losing? Or is it because of the state of the branches? Because that is one other area that we need to look at. There is a view as well that is being expressed out there that seek to suggest that when you've got more branches as a province, you become a kingmaker. It is correct, and it's also not correct. Because if you're listening at the sentiments by the SG of the ANC, branches are the ones that are going to send their nominations straight to head office.
They won't be voting as a bloc.
They won't be voting as a bloc.
Happened in 2012.
Yes. Now, what does that mean? It means that those that are in the provincial leadership, that are busy making pronouncements, are actually not moving with the current pace. Because what the SG is actually saying is that the power of the conference is in the hands of the branches. And they are trying to avoid all these kind of things, because in the past we've had a lot of provincial leaders making pronouncements, not having consulted with their regions and with their branches.
So it was probably in an effort to somehow address the issue of the PEC strong-arming these branches and saying, we're moving with this name.
Indeed, but also the ANC has on numerous occasions been unable to manage succession. And that's where you will find those that are very influential, especially at provincial level, who would go out and make pronouncements, not having consulted with the branches themselves. And I think that is one thing that the ANC is trying to do. But also at the same time, we should also not overlook the influence that provinces have on their different provinces.
Can we just hold that thought? I just wanted to rope in our guest on Skype, Mr. Mlungisi Miezo. Mlungisi, a very warm welcome to you. Your take on all that we're seeing today, this theory of perhaps Premier David Mabuza, chairperson of the ANC in Mpumalanga, now being a kingmaker.
Thank you very much, Mfundo, and to all the listeners. I think with the significant rise of numbers in Mpumalanga, I wouldn't say it really makes David Mabuza the kingpin, basically. Because why I say that is that at the end of the day, it's all down to the branches as stated by the SG. Now, given that David Mabuza is basically the chairperson of the province, it doesn't really give him the upper hand, because at the end of the day, the branches would need to decide themselves. And as stated by the guest in studio as well, that it would be a case of the branches sending their nominations and the province is trying to strong-arm the branches into making a decision. I think it would be a case of just basically now focusing on what the branches have to say, because looking at the current situation within the ANC itself, there's so many divisions basically forged by the different races that are taking place, because as you can see, there's many candidates that are basically looking to be the presidential hopefuls. So that also does the significant amount of numbers of the branches or delegates also gets split up amongst the different candidates that are there. So now we end up with votes going wayward instead of going in one direction, because it will not be the provincial chairperson that makes the final say. It would be the case of the branches that have the final say at the end of the day.
Now, Mlungisi, this in theory sounds very, very good, but practically, is that what will happen, where the branches will be given that voice, or here we are going to see some PEC members trying to strong-arm these branches?
Obviously, yes, there would be a case of maybe the PEC members stepping in to try and strong-arm these branches. But at the end of the day, with this current situation that we are seeing amongst the ruling party, we may see that, as I say, that the votes may still get wayward, because now we currently sitting with approximately about, say, 5 candidates within the ruling party itself. So now having a significant figure, e.g. your KZN, where you have people like your TGs, William Kize, you have Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as well, being predominantly from the KZN. And you see those people splitting votes within the KZN province itself. So those are the things that would be the deciders to what do the branches think, who is the suitable candidate. Now that would be basically if the branches would be looking at the current situation of the party itself, or going back to the books and looking at what the policy conference actually dictated in terms of looking at through the eye of the needle to see who would be the best candidate to actually vote for.
Now, Oliver Dixon, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. Now, your take on this discussion. Here we've got these gentlemen are saying that it really doesn't matter what position the PEC takes. It remains the prerogative of the branches to decide which name they're pushing forward. Your take on all of that?
What we must be cognizant of is the fact that members in the ANC are members of multiple structures within the party. So you may be a member of a certain branch somewhere, but you're also perhaps an MKVMA member. You're also perhaps an ANC Women's League member. You're also perhaps an ANC Youth League member. And what your league perhaps, or your other organization outside of your branch, the candidate and the issues they're endorsing for may not necessarily be the issues that your branch is endorsing for, right? So you, as a branch member, have to balance out these views and these opinions and these arguments, and that's the voice, for instance, you raise in your branch, because that's where the votes really come from. It's what members in branches across the country are saying. Importantly, what that then also means is that when you're sitting in a branch meeting, for instance, and your league or your organization outside of that branch has endorsed a different member, you need to be able to decide what structure means more to you, your branch or that. So a typical example of what I'm talking about here is what happened a few weeks ago in the West Rand. The ANC Women's League nationally, with Angie Mutshekga coming out and really saying that they're throwing their weight behind Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. That's what the Women's League is saying to us at a national level. But when Cyril Ramaphosa made a visit, for instance, to the West Rand, he was strongly welcomed by the ANC Women's League in the West Rand, singing pro-Cyril songs, throwing their weight, their specific weight as a women's league in that region behind Cyril. So there's no, branches may not, branches really place the vote, but other organizations also have some level of voting, but the majority of the power lies within the voice of the branch.
But then it makes analysis more tricky, Dixon, in that most people, I mean, the media space is littered with articles now about the second tier of leaders. Now we're talking about those people that have the constituencies, your Paul Mashadiles, Ace Magashula, Supra, David Mabuza. These gentlemen, or this second tier who has the constituency, they're said now to hold the power. But now today you're saying, no, they don't hold the power. They may claim to have consolidated their provinces if they have, but they don't have the power because the branches will still be sending their preferences straight to Lutuli House.
So if we look at Ace Magashula, for instance, Ace Magashula yields a lot of power in what was the Premier League, which apparently now doesn't exist anymore. But Ace Magashula holds a lot of power, yields a lot of power in the Free State province, right? A lot of the branches in the Free State province believe in Ace and would go in the direction he points them in. If his direction is behind Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma so that he can become chairperson or so that he can become the Secretary General behind that slate, a lot of branches would vote in that direction purely because he asked them to, and that's the sort of power he yields. But to assume that every single branch in the Free State believes in Ace Magashula and will vote in that direction is a dangerous assumption to make, because it may not necessarily be the case. But he is in a position where he can consolidate the power. So PEC can go to branches and plead with members and say, look, we would like you to vote in this direction because we as a PEC, we as a province support these issues and we believe this candidate best fits these issues. They can do that. But at the end of the day, branches may turn around at NASREC in December and vote in a different direction. We've seen this happen before, where branches go in an opposite direction of what was, Sikhwalek went into the last elective conference, and he had quite significant support behind him. The day Sikhwale withdrew his race in that elective conference, the branches who were supporting him were left confused. Who do we now vote for? And those sort of things still happens. Do you get what I'm saying?
No,
we may see Zweli Mkhize may pull out. We don't know, and we may see Sisulu pull out. So these things happen, and you can predict it up until they get there, and then it's fair game.
It's certainly about to get very, very tricky. Now we cross over to Mpumalanga, where our reporter Lemogang Foke is standing by. Lemu, a warm welcome to you. It seems you're shivering there in the cold, but warm welcome nevertheless. Lemu, just take us through the dynamics today. We saw at least that Mpumalanga now essentially, or the premier there, essentially becomes the kingmaker. What exactly are they saying at branch level? Have they given a name of who they'll be supporting?
A very good afternoon to you, Mfundo. Thank you very much indeed. A game changer at this stage, with Mpumalanga knocking Eastern Cape out of that second place and assuming second place with about 88 more delegates that they will be sending to that elective conference. Now, I must say this really changes everything, Mfundo. You know, in the past couple of weeks, months leading up to this point, it was being said that Mpumalanga will be the kingmaker, and them also taking their time in pronouncing, even though we do know that there are some parts that have already pronounced their preferred candidates. We know that the sub-region, Steve Cheta, have also come out in saying that they are in favor of Cyril Ramaphosa. And also, yet last week, Matthews Posa also campaigning in the province. And I suppose right now, with the numbers that are out, it actually does say quite a lot in terms of the dynamics in the province. We could see quite a number of delegates going with Matthews Posa on this one. We could see still a significant number rallying behind David Mabuza, the chairperson of the province, and also, you know, some just following into those other independent pronouncements that we've seen so far. But definitely this gives Mpumalanga the power, Mfundo, you know, not just as kingmakers, but I feel like, you know, at this point we're going to have a lot of provinces now. We're going to have quite a lot of these slates that are approaching Mpumalanga. We do know that the province has said over and over that they are open for, you know, to be lobbied and to be convinced to a certain particular slate that is, you know, and so I think right now with the numbers that put Mpumalanga on that number 2 spot, it could really mean a significant change in the game.
No, it certainly does look like it will be a significant one. Lemu, thank you very much for joining us. I see you're quite a trooper today. Some strong wins there. Now, that's our reporter Lemogang Foke out in Mpumalanga. Some strong wins, but she continues to give us analysis. Now, back to you, gentlemen. Your take again, she's just taking us through Mpumalanga, the dynamics there, that they're still willing to be convinced of perhaps the ultimate candidate of who they should be supporting as Mpumalanga. Do you think the chairperson there is sitting pretty and really probably going to wait this out until the very last minute?
Well, there is an assumption that seeks to suggest that chairpersons have got powers here. It might be a correct assumption now. Delegates go to conference representing branches, and branches are the ones that have got the powers to decide. But you know, when you have got about 6 candidates for the presidents of a party, it becomes quite difficult for one to come with an outright assumption to say this might be the right person to succeed. But there is a possibility of some candidates pulling out. There is a possibility also by the ANC to avoid a contest, because I think the ANC has not as yet healed from what happened in Polokwane. But also you would know that a number of provincial executive committees have been meeting. Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga and Limpopo and Gauteng. Maybe what they have been trying to do was to say, let's come with, at the end of the day, we should avoid a contest and bring all the different parties together.
But it doesn't seem they're fighting each other.
The dominant faction is the Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Zuma faction. But one cannot ignore the other candidates, because obviously they are standing because they've got support from the branches. That support has a potential of affecting the numbers of one or the 2 candidates. And that is why the different provincial committees are actually meeting. Some of the people that are being persuaded, and if there are dirty tricks that are being used, especially bribery, they might be seen to be following a particular candidate, and there's a possibility of making a turn on the eve of the conference.
Now, we've heard those reports. I'm glad you
touched
touched on bribery, because we've heard those reports that there's a going rate of 10,000. We're not obviously sure of this. We cannot authenticate, but there were those talks that there's a possibility of bribery come as the date comes a bit closer.
Indeed, that is what we're hearing about. And obviously, you can't be sure of a person that we've bribed, because they might still vote in favor of this candidate or against the candidate that they've been bribed.
No, there's certainly no honor among thieves. Dixon, your take on all of this, the assumed power that chairpersons have.
Okay. So the reason why a chairperson is assumed to yield so much power is because they would have campaigned for themselves in their province when they had their provincial elective conference to then become the chairperson of the province. That means they would have then consolidated a lot of the branches. So whoever the chairperson of certain branches are would have already showed an interest in believing in the principles and issues that that chairperson advocates for. However, to assume that's always going to be the case is dangerous, because provincial issues may not be national issues, right? So they may vote one way provincially, but vote a different way nationally. And we need to be cognizant of that difference, because what it means here, though, is that chairpersons would ordinarily then go and consolidate the branches who they know don't yet support them, and that's where they pay their focus, without wanting to consolidate the branches who they assume actually does support them, right? So Ace Magashula may be very strong in Bloemfontein, Welkom, and Kroonstad, but that may not be the case in Kwakwa. This is hypothetically. I don't know what Ace Magashula's numbers looks like in the Free State, right? So hypothetically, that may be the case. Kwakwa may be such a big branch that its sway in the rest of the Free State, for instance.
But there certainly is a challenge from the grouping at Thabo Manyun.
Yes, to vote in a different direction. So now you're sitting at a conference where the Free State isn't one organization, isn't one branch, don't speak in one voice, because across the province, branches believe differently. Do not underestimate the power of branches.
Let's just rope in Mlungisi. Mlungisi, your take, that is assumed power that chairpersons hold. I mean, we saw sometime this weekend, actually, the likes of Paul Mashatile appearing on 2 slates, and some would then assume that clearly he must be wielding that kind of power for both camps to be recognizing him.
I'd basically like to disagree in terms of the powers of the chairperson as well, because we basically are reiterating that the powers is within the branches itself, because it's the branches that also put the chairperson where he is, or she is, because ideally at the end of the day, the branches are the ones that make the deciding factors and hold the key to actually who is elected. Now, they do hold a minimum amount of power, because on the grounds that they were elected, and by those same constituency will then trust their judgment. But at the end of the day, if the judgment is not suitable for the particular branch, then the branch will not basically elect or basically select in that particular process of the chairperson, because the chairperson is merely also an elected candidate of that particular organization. So now, with regards to the branches themselves, they may decide to go wayward and not follow suit with the chairperson, which is basically what we're seeing in certain areas, where you hear the pronouncement of the chairperson on a provincial level, but you hear certain branches calling certain other individuals' names to be in their support. So yes, as much as the chairperson is elected by the branches itself, the national leadership will also be elected by the branches, because at the end of the day, the numbers speak for themselves. It's not the chairperson that will be voting alone. It will be the branches that will use their own discretion.
Now, as a political observer, tell me about this. It's something that has been also bugging me generally. Now, if a camp is going to put together its top 6, and you've got a chair that appears on both camps, if it is a policy argument that here your top 6 are people that you believe will champion your agenda or will push through your policy, what then does it mean when you appear on Cyril Ramaphosa's slate, who possibly stands for inclusive growth, and then you appear on Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's slate, who possibly stands for radical economic transformation? If, for instance, we're talking about Paul Mashatile, is it then really about policy, because they're on 2 opposing sides?
In my view, would be a case of trying to lure numbers, because if we look at the current situation, within certain areas, like, for example, your Gauteng province, which has basically come out to say that mostly if you go to some of the Gauteng branches, they are pro Cyril Ramaphosa in this particular instance. Now, if you look at that instance and take it that into cognizance, that basically the part of Paul Mashatile would be a case of pulling him in so that to try and change the mindset of the people in Gauteng to ensure that they vote in that particular wayward in terms of following suit, in terms of choosing the candidate of maybe Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or ideally would be a case of not really principle itself, but it would be a case of them trying to make sure that they secure the numbers because of his his character as the chairperson within the region itself.
No, thank you very much. Your take is that it possibly is a numbers game. Well, let's just go to our poll question this week. The question is, do you support a combined ANC slate and 2 deputy presidents? Do tweet us your opinion, at least on that poll, your answers, or you can go to our website and give us your answers there. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And that's where we leave it. Until next time.